Maria, thank you very much. Last week I was invited to speak to the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, and they said, can you speak for 40 minutes? You'll be pleased to know I really struggled to speak for 40 minutes, given we're looking to wrap this session up. And an awful lot of what I was hoping to speak to you about has been discussed this morning. So I'm proposing that I actually rattle through the slides and to allow us to have a bit more of a question and answer session with you as we can. The background to everything here, and this is what I want you to be thinking about whilst I go through some pretty pictures. It's been well laid out. This industry has to reduce costs. This industry also has to introduce more economic value into the economy. That means jobs, ultimately. And I just want you thinking, it's everyone's responsibility. It's not down to individual institutions. It's not down to just the government or just an industry. And an awful lot of what the Catapult does is to try and address these conundrums by bringing everybody together to do that. So, Carolyn has given an introduction to the Catapults, sponsored by the Technology Strategy Board. It is a major programme, over £1 billion, close to £1.5 billion, to establish 7 major centres of excellence in the different sectors you can see at the top here. It is a long-term support for looking at innovation in ways that we have not done in the UK for a long, long time. The beauty for us in offshore renewable energy is access to these other 6 catapults and their industries and their solutions to their industries' riddles that, frankly, the parallels are uncanny. It is a really, really useful tool, ultimately about delivering a know-how economy. We know how to move technology innovation forwards. The whole Catapult ethos was established by Herman Hauser under Mandelson, actually looking at European models and overseas. So long-term government support being the solution here. Leveraged, I might add, very heavily by industry and other grant sourcing, so it's not exclusively government to fund it. But I just want to point out on this graph here, in terms of the evolution of technology, which starts in the bottom left, which is understanding the physics of, and if I use the case of wave power, for example, you start with the physics, understanding how much energy is in those waves, and then somebody in the middle box will invent a widget to extract that energy and convert it to electricity. And then we get to large-scale testing on the right-hand side. And quite often, innovation is thought of solely as large-scale testing and development. Devices that are going into EMEC, the devices that you mentioned that are on the extensions to current wind farms. Yes, it is. Of course, an awful lot of that innovation is necessary at that scale to be fully proven and tested. But what the Catapult does is make sure we've got an awful lot more of innovation and knowledge brought in at far earlier stages in our development of technology. So using our academic sector an awful lot more, using others around the public sector an awful lot more, bringing all into play all these industrial experiences and mistakes that have been made an awful lot more, so that when you get to this industrialized commercial and testing, you actually do it with a far stronger degree of confidence. That's a very important thing. So our vision, quite simply, abundant, affordable energy from offshore wind, wave and tidal power. That's been discussed at length this morning about the ambitions as to why, so I'm not going to go through these things again. But we're building a deep centre of, a large-scale centre of deep technical knowledge in the Catapult. Last year when I spoke to you, we were about 5 people in the organisation. We're now 110. And part of that has come from the merger of that we had in April with NAREC. So we've got 40 people in Glasgow now, 70 people in NAREC. NAREC has got large-scale testing facilities, very modern testing facilities, so blade testing up to 100 metres long, drivetrain testing at 3 megawatts and soon to be 15 megawatts. And we also, you may have seen on the news, there's the Blythe Offshore Demonstrator project, which NAREC did very well to get consent for. But we always knew there would be a struggle to attract finance into it, and NAREC were never going to be building out that project. So we're now working with the Crown to get that project fully into the public domain to attract finance, because what we want to see is a project in the water very soon to bring forward all these ideas about innovation, so not just testing turbines, but accessing and resolving some of the riddles around all the other aspects of offshore wind. So we're not doing this on our own. I promote very strongly a collaborative model of working with others across the industry. So I've established very powerful industry advisory groups so that our activities stay in tune with what industry is looking for. Ditto with the research community. There's an awful lot of really good stuff goes on within the academic community. in the UK and overseas. Hands up those in industry who actually use it. We need to get that fixed. We need to see an awful lot more of that value come back into our sector. And as I mentioned, partnerships with other players in the public sector, the Carbon Trust there, with the Crown, with the Energy Innovation Centre, WAFUP and EMEC, all very, very important for prioritised focus on the industry's needs so that we can resolve issues much more quickly than we've been able to do in the past. So key themes for us, if you just focus on the left-hand column there, it starts with knowledge creation and thought leadership. So just understanding the regime of how windy is it, what are turbulent conditions and wind actually meaning for the machines, and same with waves, same with tidal power. As an example of the types of things where we need an awful lot more knowledge to be flowing into this industry. And you take that right through, it takes you into testing, longer-term strategic programs, and right through to encouraging more SMEs to bring in innovative solutions into this industry. So we're really drawing on all the firepower that we have in the UK to do that. Why do we need to do it? Well, new technologies always need some support. We've got a new nuclear station in a picture here. It needs government support to get it going. It needs more support on the technologies that are utilised within the plant. And it's pretty obvious that in some of the technologies we're developing in offshore renewables, whether it's wave, or particularly wave and tidal, they're kind of more difficult to do than some of the more intuitive ones. So you always need some support, not just in terms of financial models, but bringing stronger support through an innovation level as well. And you typically then have three routes to doing that. You can do it in volume, you can do it learning by doing, and you can do it through industry breakthroughs in terms of prototypes and so on. We are supporting all of these at all stages of development, and we want to see more of it. Why bother? Well, this has been said before, but we published a report 2 or 3 months ago about the economic value of having offshore renewables in the UK. If you take the 15 gigawatt scenario from DEC, we estimate 150,000 jobs on a direct and indirect basis in the UK. 150,000 jobs. Nearly £7 billion of GVA, gross value added into the economy annually, if we can achieve that. So whilst we're focusing on costs, and it's very easy to belittle the industry about the size and scale of the challenges that are ahead of it, I'm looking at this and saying this is why we must do it. This is why we really must have that achieved and locked in for decades, because it's decades worth of value that we really need to keep focusing on. So a couple of quick examples of bigger things we're doing to do that. We're working with the Crown Estate on a project called Sparta here. It's a relatively simple project. It's about creating a database for performance data to be put in into a common pot that we'll anonymise, and those that are putting in the data can then see where they sit on a curve against the rest of the industry. It's an example of pulling the industry together to show how we can jointly tackle issues that are facing us. But it's a lesson learned from conventional generation. Conventional generation has had streams and streams of data to learn from and to reform the industry around for decades. We all know that. Gas turbines, nuclear, even coal plant. The industry gets together, shares data, and they all know why plant doesn't work as well as it should and what to do to fix it. The thermal industry is about efficiency. We're about growth, and we need all this data to come in to create that growth. And data is a huge point about what all of these catapults are about, getting lots and lots of data from all sorts of sources, and importantly, making it very accessible for people that are far cleverer than me to access and then bring forward much stronger industry solutions. We're also working with the Crown Estate to replicate some of the benefits that they've done in the offshore wind accelerator, but applying that to the marine world, wave and tidal. How can we get the industry to come together to resolve some of the very common issues that the wave and tidal sector often sees? Now, this next slide, I think, strongly reflects the aspects of what Hugh was presenting earlier. These are our priority areas. So if anyone is sitting in the room saying, Andrew, on these things on the slides here, we know everything that needs to be done around these things. It's there right now. We should just be churning them out in hundreds, and Adam's kind of tractor factory analogy. We need to know an awful lot more about these key priority areas. so that we can fully bring the costs down in our sector, so that we can provide an awful lot more value-added jobs that are locked in for decades. And that, frankly, becomes the exportable opportunity for me for UK renewable. So when other countries around the world say, hey, we want to develop a very large-scale offshore wind program, well, we'll then have engineers as a country that we can send around the world and say, right, for this water depth, for this ground condition type, for these types, you know, for the strength of winds and so on, this is the type of turbine you need, this is the type of foundation you need, this is how you're going to do your cabling. And standards, Hugh's absolutely right, standards needs to be worked on an awful lot harder. Standardization and bringing the industry together to push all these areas along far more beneficially than we have had in the past. The Catapult will play a key role in all of these things. So in conclusion, I'm sorry, I'm rattling through this, I appreciate that. I think the Catapults are a significant step change in innovation from what we've had for a long, long time in the UK. The merger with NAREC presents a huge business in terms of deep technical knowledge that we can bring to the market now to provide industry solutions. Strongly collaborative. I mentioned the Crown, BIS, DEC, and Carolyn was talking about the industrial strategy. So there's an awful lot of good components, good innovation pieces of work going together around the country. We want to see it brought together with a much more prioritised and simpler access for the market to work on. And just let me reiterate, why is it worth doing? Well, £6.7 billion of economic value and 150,000 jobs, to me just says this is worth pursuing, and let's stay with it. So, thank you very much.